Again, thank you guys for joining. I know it's a busy time, so I appreciate the time that you're going to spend with me. So what I hope to accomplish today is to maybe have somebody pick up a tidbit or an idea or something they haven't heard of before. Myself, I'm Bill Alexander. I'm the manager of the Mount Laurel office, and I've been the manager here 16 years, and I've been with the company 32 of the 33 years I've been in the business. Seen a lot of markets, but I've never seen a market like this before. And I feel for you all. It's not an easy market to go through working with buyers. So that's why I decided to put this together, and hopefully this will help you possibly win a bid. So what we could do is we'll start from there. So what I'm hoping for today is to get you a tidbit or a piece of information or an idea that will help you win the bid. Also, very important, we want to understand what a listing agent is looking for. Now, listing agents are taking 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 offers sometimes. So what we want to do is talk about how we can make ours stand out to them and what they're looking for. And in a nutshell, they're looking for something that's easy. So that's what we're going to talk about today, because they have to shuffle through 50 offers, and it's not easy for them. I know we've had some breakdowns in communication with listing agents, but just realize that they're overwhelmed, just like we're under the gun as buyers agents trying to get these offers accepted. So the only difference is they're guaranteed money there, where you got to put your show your person more homes. I understand that, but what we want to do is pretty much make it as easy as possible for them, so they will look at our offer and give it more consideration than the next guy. We're also going to have an outline for buyers to see and choose from. What we can't do as agents is we can't recommend the buyer do this or do that, or recommend anything that's out of the ordinary, especially if you're in a disclosed dual agency situation. But what you can do is have a list, what we have here, of things that buyers have put in offers. And that's the way you want to present it, where you've seen buyers before put these things in the offer, and it's helped them win the bid and get the home. So you never want to say, this is what I suggest, especially with what we're doing nowadays, where we're waiving no appraisal will make the difference. Going over list price by $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. Those things are scary, because what's going to happen, or may happen, which we hope it doesn't, that maybe a year or two down the line, somebody finds there's a major problem with their house and they waive the home inspection issue. We don't want to see any lawsuits come back. So what we'll do is we'll talk about that also, how you can avoid any lawsuits in the future from anything that's on here, and talk about the importance of not recommending, but showing them a list of what buyers have done before they put in their offer to win bids. Okay, and probably most important, this is a really hard market for both the buyers agents and the sellers agents. It's stressing us to the max. So, but what we really need to be concerned with is the long-term, our career. And one thing that's super important to us is our reputation in this business. It is worth its weight in gold in real estate. You all probably experienced it before, unless you're a new agent, where you've dealt with an agent who lacks communication, lacks respect, lacks everything that makes an agent good. And you had to deal with that. And what you've done, whether you know it or not, you always put a mental note in the back of your mind that that's probably someone you don't want to deal with in the future. So, it's a black mark on their reputation if they deal like that. And it hurts their business eventually, because if there's 3 or 5 homes to show, and you show in a normal market, sometimes people are not going to want to work with that agent. So there could be on an occasion where you would even tell the buyer, this is a very difficult person to work with. This is one of the homes we're going to go see today, but it will hurt them in the future if their reputation is ruined. And it's very easy these days to be a listing agent and ruin your reputation, because that communication's not there. They're used to communicating with 1 or 2 offers, or maybe just 1 offer in the normal market. And it's a very intimate communication, one-on-one, constantly, back and forth every other day. Well, now, after you submit your offer, you communicate with them briefly. They're going on to another 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30 offers And there's no intimacy, no close connection between the buyer's agent and the listing agent at that point. So their communication tends to lack because they have a lot to handle. So what we're going to do is try to talk about that and make sure that we come out of this as agents with a good reputation, because what it will do is it will entice an agent in the future to want to do business with you. And if they want to do business with you, they'll give your offer a better consideration, or vice versa. If it's a normal market, they have a buyer for a listing that you have, they'll remember how great you were to work with, and they'll be more inclined to push things towards you for your benefit of getting that listing sold. So I can't stress enough, how important your reputation is to get through this market. And I know it's hard. It's hard for all the communication that needs to go back and forth with all these offers. So that's what we want to do there. So those are a few of the things that we want to accomplish today. And I want to apologize in advance that I've taken some Claritin D, which has dried me out. So I'm going to be drinking a lot of water. Okay, guys? I won't apologize every time I sip. I'll apologize up front. Okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about the ugly sibling of the shiny conventional cash deal. That's what everyone's looking for nowadays. They want that cash, 30%, 40% down, or a 40% down conventional mortgage. That seems to be the ultimate cream of the crop when these listing agents are going through these offers. But let's face it, guys, there are a ton of really good FHA and VA buyers out there that are getting slighted in this market, and they're getting passed over. In a normal market, they would probably be winning the bid. So one thing to remember with FHA and VA is that the buyer actually has, in this slide we have here with the FHA addendum, it specifically states the purchaser shall have the privilege and option of proceeding with consumption of the contract without regard to the amounts of the appraised valuation. That would be the second page, okay, Eileen? Or I'm sorry, like the fourth page on there. So we'll go down to the addendum. One more. Bingo, there we go. So that's the FHA addendum. What I can suggest you do is that a lot of agents, experienced agents, newer agents, don't realize that an FHA VA buyer can buy a property if it underappraises, if they have the money to come up with. So when the agent gets the offer, they're just assuming that throwing the FHA and VA offers to the side, looking at conventional and cash. What I would suggest you do is take a copy of this addendum and add it to the offer when you send it over, highlighting the area that does allow them to purchase a property. It is their privilege, it says, to purchase a property if it does underappraise. You would be surprised how many people or how many agents do not realize that. They think the FHA VA addendum reads that if it does not appraise at that price, the buyer does not have to purchase it. That is the truth. If it does not appraise for that price, the buyer has the option not to purchase it. But it also gives the buyer the option that if it does not appraise for that price, they can go through with the purchase. So it's just a matter of them coming up with the additional funds. So I have my agents, and I can tell you I stole this from somebody. The offer came in and the agent put the FHA addendum on there. I went through the offers with my agent, and I had seen that they had put the FHA addendum on there. I thought that's a very clever thing to do. So you're reminding that listing agent, highlighting that area that they can go above the value, because they're going to look at your offer. Yep, got that. Yeah, got that, Danielle. We're going to talk about that. Absolutely. Yeah. So they're going to look at your offer, and if it does have that addendum on there, we'll remind them that the buyer can purchase it if it does not appraise at the sale price. So, and a lot of agents, you'd be surprised, do not understand that or are not aware of that. Okay, so what you would do with your FHA VA, add this addendum on there, and what you can do is highlight that area and take it from there. Now, also, we can go back, Eileen. Second page. There you go. The second page. Yep. Also, just a simple equation when it comes to trying to figure out how much the buyer will need to come up with if there's a appraised value difference. Okay. I see a lot of agents struggle with this. It's a simple math problem. If someone's purchasing, I'm going to use it for even amounts, a $400,000 sale price. and they're putting 20% down. You know, the appraisal comes in at say 380. Now 380 is going to be the new sale price, and they need 20% of the 380 down. So the difference of the mortgage amount and the appraisal value is the money that the buyer would have to come up with. So it's good to have them know that up front. Okay. Moving on, we're going to talk. I know there's only a few quotes on here, or a few lines about the escalation clause, but we're going to talk about this a little bit more in depth. You're seeing it more and more. What I'm also seeing now, a lot of times in the MLS, we're seeing agents state that no escalation clauses will be accepted. Personally, I think you're doing your seller a disservice if you don't do that, but that's my own opinion there. But agents are putting that in there now. So you would just go forward with a regular offer if that's what they're requesting. But one thing when we deal with the escalation clause is we forget that other people are doing the escalation clause also. So what you want to do is put a funky number in there. If they're willing to go $5,000 above the highest price, put $5,111 or whatever it might be. Because what's going to happen is most of your buyers are going to go in increments. They say 2, 3, 5, 10, 15. They're going to do even amounts. You don't want to tie with somebody. You want to have that extra $100 or $11 in there or whatever it might be. That strange number in the long run could win you the bid. Okay. What I'm seeing too, a little off topic, is we're seeing a lot of offers come in with escalation clauses. You know, 10,000 above asking price, things of that nature. And what the buyer's doing is they're getting buyer's remorse after it's accepted and they're walking away. So remember, if you're on the listing side of things, the highest offer not necessarily is the best offer. So what they're doing is they're positioning themselves in a way where they can say yes or no, because it's just an offer form, not a contract form at that point. I know in New Jersey, we're supposed to put a contract in as the offer, but 90% of the agents still do an offer form. So that's what's happening there. So just remember that what is happening is agents are putting in offers for buyers that are strange escalation clause, a very high escalation clause with everything you want to see in there. That's great. You know, a lot of cash down, waiving inspection, paying whatever the difference is for appraised value. But then what's happening is when the seller accepts that, they're backing out on it. That seems to be a strategy of a certain company right now, of which I can't say their name, but that is happening. It's putting their buyer in a position where they could say yes or no. They're winning the bid, but they're backing out. Be careful of that on the listing side, okay? Make sure that you're requiring your buyer to give you proof of funds with every single offer if they're going to go above or pay the difference with the appraised value. The more information financially you have on them, the better the offer is going to be. I personally wouldn't be putting any escalation clause in. I wouldn't be putting any appraisal gap issues in there that I'm paying it without getting the proof of funds from the buyer. Having a proof of funds and putting that offer in is going to really put the listing agent at ease. They may have 4 or 5 other escalation clauses or whatever the case may be, 6 or 7, but they're not giving them proof of funds. Show them if it's a $300,000 offer and you have an escalation clause up to $340,000 for the highest price, $3,000 over, make sure you have something stating or showing bank account, 401k, whatever it is, that buyer has that money available to pay the difference. Because again, we're finding a lot of people out there, I won't mention any companies again, but they're putting offers in saying they can go above that, and then the time comes, they don't have the money, and the deal's falling apart. So be very, very careful when you're dealing with a buyer to make sure you see in writing and tell them how it's going to help them submitting the offer when they do it. And they may get to the point where I don't want them to know my financials. Well, if you don't want them to know your financials and you're offering something here, they have the right to know that you have the money to pay for the difference. That's what you need to tell the buyer. Also, they're not going to take their offer serious without proof of funds. And the proof of funds kind of solidifies the fact that if there is an appraisal gap, that they do officially have the money to pay for that appraisal gap too. So you must put a cap just talking about this, I've seen offers come in where it's 5,000 above the highest priced offer, and that's it. You got to put a cap on these escalation clauses, because if you put an open-ended price on there, it's actually an illegal offer. If that offer ever gets pulled by the file from the New Jersey Real Estate Commission, we're all in big trouble. So when you are putting it in there, make sure that you're telling them that, okay, you will pay up to, it's 300,000 list. You're just saying you'll pay up to 340, the highest that you'll pay up to. Make sure you're capping them, saying a $5,000 escalation clause or $5,111 escalation clause with a cap of 340, 360, 320, whatever they want to cap it at. But you do have to have that cap in there. If not, it is an illegal offer, and it will, if it ever, they've closed, trust me, they've closed with offers coming in like that. But if that file ever gets pulled, or if the buyer ever reads something stating that they shouldn't put the offer in open-ended, they can decide to come back and they can sue you. We do not want that to happen, okay? So put that cap on there too. And now when you're dealing with the escalation clause, again, just think in your mind and let the buyer know that there are going to be other escalation clauses that are going to be in there. So let them put their best foot forward, let them be as aggressive as possible, but tell them that they're going to be dealing with escalation clauses. And they could get beat out by an escalation clause. Just by putting that escalation in there does not guarantee them the house, because again, they can't put an open-ended price on there with no price. They have to put a cap on there, okay? Someone said that the escalation clause is hard to find in zip forms. I truly believe that is hard to find. I don't think we have anything in zip forms for it right now. When you're drawing up the contract and the offer, you're going to need to put that in there, escalation clause with the dollar amount, and spell it out, okay? So that's what we'll do there. Almost every single property is getting an escalation clause offer now. So we're seeing it become the norm. I can tell you this much, we're seeing a slight teeny shift in the market that's going maybe a little bit towards more of a normal market. You're going to see a trend that'll wave from California to Florida, and then it hits Jersey. For some reason, it kind of waves that way. There are pockets of the market where people are still going hog wild and going well over the asking price. But we're starting to see pockets of the market where the time on the market is a little longer. So as opposed to 3 days and 30 offers, we're looking at 10 days and 30 offers. I've received offers with, okay, I'll answer that at the end. So we're seeing now it's taking 10 days, maybe 15 days before they're getting an offer. That's a good indication that the market is sort of shifting a little bit towards more of a normal market. How we would get to a normal market, and a normal market would be 3 or 4 months on the market from list to close. How we're going to get there is days on the market are going to creep up a little bit. I don't see that happening where it's going to affect price too soon, but the days on the market are going to start creeping up. And we're going to see a slight drip of inventory come through over the next month or so now. How did we get here also is a question that you're going to get asked by your buyers and your sellers. How we got where we're at right now, it's not an overinflated demand for housing. It is a true demand. The millennials are a larger group than the baby boomers were. So there's actually more of them in the market. The biggest amount of people in the market ever out of any class that we have as far as baby boomers, X, and all like that. So with so many of them in there, the delayed factor was the millennials' vision was not so much the American dream of owning a home and having the white picket fence and being in the suburbs or the condo or whatever. Their vision was more of, you know, I don't want to be tied down with a home. That's not what I want. I want to be able to go here, do this, do whatever I want to do. So a lot of them sat out of the market and didn't see it as a value. But there's this big thing that happened, and it was called COVID. COVID came through, and a lot of these millennials that were maybe living at home still or renting a place or whatever were stuck inside. And being inside, they started to see the value of a home. They started to see the value of more space. They started to see the value of a backyard. They started to see the value of not going to the refrigerator in the middle of the night and running into their mother or father when they're in their underwear. So they started to see that value, and it pushed them into the market, and they came on really strong through COVID. So that's one of the reasons for where we're at, because that's the largest group of people we've ever had that are hitting the ages of the prime ages of buying real estate. Now, that combined with new construction, when the bubble hit way back when, new construction just kind of came to a halt. It just ceased. It stopped happening. Builders did not want to purchase any more land. They did not want to build anything. So what happened for almost a 10-year period, we were 50% and some markets 80% behind in new construction building. So there weren't the homes that were coming on the market that were going to be available for people to purchase. So that's kind of like where we're at now and how we've gotten where we are. It wasn't an over demand or an inflated demand like it was with the '08 crash. It's a totally different market. Now, that's not to say we're not going to see corrections, and I say corrections because we are going to see corrections coming in the market. Like I said earlier, we're going to see some days on the market. It's going to take a little longer. Prices are not going to skyrocket as much as they have before. There's going to be a level off of that. But we are going to have pockets that are going to still be hot and drag on for a lot longer. But what I'm seeing and hearing from a lot of colleagues and a lot of what I read is we're in this market till the end of the year here, and then we got to see things happen. One thing that's happening too that is shaking us a little bit are interest rates are starting to rise. So unfortunately, you have a buyer, you're working with them, they're looking at a $300,000 home, and they have to pay $330 to get it, and they're putting in offers of $310, $320, $330, still losing out. Now all of a sudden the interest rate goes up a point or 3/4 of a point. They no longer can afford that 340 home. So now they're looking at a lower price home. So it's even harder to get them to do what they need to do and obviously go ahead higher than list price and go forward and purchase it. So they're looking at a home that has less, possibly smaller. Maybe they can't afford to stay in the same location they were looking at. So your job is really, really going to get very hard over the next couple months. And I feel for you guys, and I know you're working hard. So just keep that in the back of your mind that you may have to switch a buyer from being a 340 buyer to a 310 buyer or a 320 buyer. And $20,000 in this market makes a huge difference right now. So we're going to wrap up the escalation clause and take some questions at the end for that too. So the next thing we have here is what we have seen buyers put in their offers. This is a working list. There's a lot of things we can put in here that I may not have in here, but I just put down things that I've seen buyers put in their offers. What you don't want to do, again, is you do not want to sit in front of a buyer and say, you should put a non-refundable deposit down. You should, waive appraisal value and pay the difference. Do not do that. Let them know, let them see a list, and it can be simply written what you've seen buyers put in offers. What we don't want to put in there is what we've seen agents put in offers, because we don't, in no way, shape, or form do we want the agents to push the market. These are decisions that were made by the buyers. So you can give a list of what you've seen buyers do to your buyer, and they can look at it and decide whether they want to or they don't want to do it. But at least you're educating them to what buyers have put in offers and how they've won bids. So we'll start working down that list. But what I want to also recommend is that after you've given a list to the buyer, they've chose a couple things, they do want to put an escalation clause in, whatever they want to do, and they want to waive a home inspection, do yourself a favor. Just shoot them a text or an email. Basically, in a nutshell, saying, I understand that you want to go 30,000 above list. I understand that you want to waive the appraisal and pay the difference. I understand you want to waive home inspections. Please understand that these are not my recommendation, that these are things that our buyers are doing in this market so they can get a home. That's all you need to do. A simple little email or text, do that, have it in your records, because again, coming back to the fact that they waive that home inspection, and then 3 or 4 months from now, they find out there's a foundation issue or something of that nature. You don't want to be in a situation where they said, well, my agent told me I should do this. That's the worst thing in the world that could happen. So make sure that you're following up. If they choose any of these things, make your own list, and again, title it what you have seen buyers put in their offers to win bids. That's what you would put in there. So some of the things that we've seen in here, and again, this isn't everything, and I don't have a silver bullet or a magic wand. I wish I really did and help you guys out. I know how hard you're working, but some of these things may be new to you. Some of them may be old hat. Some of them may be far-fetched, but these are actual things that I've seen come in offers from buyers to our listings at my office. Obviously, large down payment, and that's with the signing of the contracts. The large down payment would come in. I think this is something that you can recommend to a buyer, because if anything happens with the deal falling apart, having to do with their mortgage or anything of that nature, that money should be returned to them. Keep in mind, though, when you're dealing with large down payments, let them know there are only 4 ways an escrow deposit can be released back to the buyer or the seller or whomever. Only 4 ways, guys. And it's not, even if the buyer or the seller is in breach, even if it's total in breach, even though we're not attorneys, but we can see it and we're laymen, that the seller is in breach of contract, they should give that money back to them. That money has to stay in that escrow account until both parties sign off on it. So the seller can be a very uncooperative person and say, you know what, I took my house off the market for 2 weeks and they won't buy it and has a little structural damage. I'm not signing a release. That money does have to stay in the escrow account, because we do need signatures from both parties before it's released. So that's one way, signatures from a buyer and a seller stating how the money is to be distributed, whether it's all going back to the buyer, or they negotiated some to the seller, or whatever the case may be. Sometimes I've even seen it negotiated where some goes towards commission, but that would need to be in writing by them. Also, keep in mind that when you are signing a contract and then it has to go to a release, the release must match the way the contract was drawn up. What I'm saying is, if you did the contract in DocuSign in electronic form, the release must be done in electronic form DocuSign. That's how they would match the signatures. So if it was done at wet signature, then the release would need to be in wet signature. There is one way that you can do it electronically or vice versa, whether it doesn't match, and that is have the buyer and the seller have a copy of their license along with the release. So if the release was done in DocuSign and it's a wet signature, the contracts were done in DocuSign, it's a wet signature release, get a copy of their license, which shows their signature front and back of it, and accounting can release that. That meets the laws that are required to release that. So we have the one where both the buyer and seller sign the release. The second one would be that an attorney's involved and they've drawn up a release and both parties agree to it. So you can agree between the buyer and seller, attorneys are involved and they agree to it. The third one is going to be a court order to release the funds. And the fourth one is going to be the way it's released is at closing with a successful closing. That's the way it can be released. So when you're talking to the buyers about putting a large deposit down, make sure you're telling them that if this goes south, I can't guarantee you that I'll get that money back to you in a day or two. It may drag on. And too many times the deal falls apart. The buyer needs that money to go and buy another home. So just make sure you make a mental note of that. 4 ways that it happens: a signed release from both parties, attorneys involved in the signed release, court order, or a successful settlement. The second one would be a non-refundable down payment on that. That's where you don't want to get into saying, well, you should put a non-refundable payment down on there. But we have seen buyers do that, put a $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 non-refundable payment down. Most of the time that we've seen that, it's been with a cash offer where they put a non-refundable deposit down, where there is no mortgage involved, and they were waiving all appraisal, all inspections. So that's when we've seen that happen. That is something that the buyer should pick from a list. It should not be coming from your lips. The buyer can also offer to pay for the title fee, the title clerk fee, and the transfer tax, which is a nice thing for the seller to get a relief on that. The buyer fee is usually around, the title fee is usually around $250, $300. And obviously the transfer tax, you can figure that out on transfer tax. And they're putting it in the offer that the buyer will pay for the seller's title clerk fee and also their transfer tax. Then we're seeing this one, which is becoming a little bit more and more popular. The buyer's paying a portion or a percentage of the seller's closing costs. This is kind of good in two ways. One way, the bottom line for the seller is staying the same. If they're going to pay 3% of the closing cost for the seller, and your offer may not be the highest one in there, but there's 3% that you have to play for the appraised value because you can put it a little bit lower and you're paying for them. Their bottom line is going to stay the same, but it does help with a low appraisal where you're not getting into a problem dealing with coming up with additional money. A lot of times this might happen after the deal is done. You can go back and say to the other agent, I'm talking after you have contracts and everything, and you say, listen, I have an idea. I know we're all worried about appraisal. How about if the buyer pays 3% towards the seller's closing cost and we reduce the property by 3%? It's not affecting the seller whatsoever. They are still getting the bottom line, but it's helping in case an appraisal does come in really tight. So that's one thing to remember when you're doing something like that, that would help. And we're seeing it more and more where the buyer is willing to pay for the seller, a portion of the seller's closing costs. Usually it's a percentage, okay? And the other thing I've seen, and we had one recently, where buyers are offering a vacation or a VRBNB gift card, or they have a timeshare, they're offering it to them, a weekend getaway, they have a house down the shore, they're offering it to them. We're seeing that happen all the time, and it's perfectly legit, and it can happen, okay? So we're seeing that. So if you have a buyer that has a maybe a second house down Ocean City or something like that they rent out here and there, maybe they might want to throw it in there and basically say that they'll give them 1 week in July or whatever to the sellers for a vacation. It might be something, again, the seller's putting some value on that. They're seeing the buyers being creative. They're seeing the buyer really does want the house by putting something creative in there like that. But I have seen this, and it was the exact scenario was they owned a home or a condo in Ocean City. They put the offer in, giving the seller a week for that summer, any week they chose, but they'd have to choose before such and such a date so they can get it all rented out too. But I've seen some strange things, and that was one of them. Another one seems to be popular, and I've heard this from other managers, is the buyers giving a credit to the seller for their moving expenses. So what they're doing is they're going to the table and they're writing a check right to the moving company. The buyer's writing a check and it's coming right out of that, and they're paying for their moving services. Again, this can have a dollar amount on it. You can help with appraised value because the seller's looking at their bottom line, or at least they should be. If their agent's worth their salt, they should be getting them to concentrating on their bottom line. So that would help too, where they actually pay for the moving expenses. So, and we talked about the acceleration clause, which we talked about, which that's almost the norm right now. So that's happening with everything. One thing I want to talk about, this is kind of really important, and I'm going to give a shameless plug to Prosperity, but they deserve it. You can go in with a pre-qual letter. Well, pre-qualification letter, as you all know, in this day and age is worth nothing. What sellers want to see is a pre-approval. And I'm not sure if you know it or not, but Prosperity has the Buyer Advantage program. Can you flick for me, Eileen, to the next page or the third page? Next page. One more. It's not on there? Is there another one after that? After the FHA addendum? That's it? Okay, all right. I didn't include it in there, but that must be the old one I sent you. But it's called the Prosperity Buyer's Advantage. They literally do the mortgage app and they do it very quickly, and the buyer is approved. They're completely 100% approved. They just need to plug the house in there. So when you're doing something like that and you're putting an offer in where you have an approved buyer, you can submit the actual approval. The state just need to plug the home in. They're ready to go. So now they may be able to compete with a cash offer. It's something that you definitely should do, especially if you're in a price range where there's a lot of investors out there purchasing up these homes cash. You should have them on the Prosperity Buyer's Advantage, because this will make it just like it's cash. Hopefully the listing agent will see that. It's not just a credit check. It's a full-blown approval. They've done everything. And again, just waiting to plug in the home and you're good to go there. So that's how you can compete with cash offers. And that will help you actually get your foot in the door and give you a little step up from the next guy who only has a pre-approval. I'm just going to talk about that, Danielle. Just was going to talk about that right now. What other thing that Prosperity has, and it's awesome. There we go. The $10,000 closing guarantee. Guys, if they go through the buyer advantage and they have the approval, Prosperity is saying that once they plug in the house and they find it and set a settlement date, if it does not settle on time, they will give $5,000 to the seller and $5,000 to the buyer. So they're guaranteeing that this thing will close and it's going to close on time. Adding this along with the buyer advantage and the approval to an offer, the seller's going to say, hey, you know what? They miss it by a day. I make $5,000. That's cool. Or the seller's going to say, you know what? I have another home. I'm settling on the 23rd. I'm sure these people don't want to pay $10,000 out. So they're going to make that closing date. You could get that done even if you're competing with somebody who might be even offering a little bit higher. You're giving a guaranteed closing date. This is worth its weight in gold. I see it used a lot in my office, not nearly enough where I would like to see it used, especially in this competitive buyer's market. But it's literally pretty much putting it out there saying that if we don't close, both the buyer and the seller are going to get $5,000 from Prosperity. That's going to get you in the door. Now, keep in mind, if you're dealing with an FHA loan, again, you can still do the FHA loan, have it all in there, just be able to plug in have a pre-approval, and you need to plug in the home. So that would help you competing maybe against conventional loans where they don't have the pre-approval in there, okay? And I'm pretty sure, but I do need to check that it is available on FHA. They'll give a pre-approval with just the appraisal value needed, or something real close. And even if it isn't, the mortgage rep can write you something up stating that everything is in here, we're ready for pre-approval, just need to put the house in and we're good to go. That's a great thing to use that'll help you out. So we'll move on. That's my shameless plug for Prosperity. If you don't use them, you should. Good stuff, good service. My guy's great, just to let you know that. What we're seeing also is buyers are paying for, it's a small amount, but they're paying for a portion or the warranty, the home warranty. They're purchasing it for the seller. They're buying an upgraded version so that the seller's covered for everything between now and the time of closing. That might be a $60 item, guys, or a $110 item, but it is worth something to give the seller peace of mind between now and the settlement that they do have the warranty. And also it gives the buyer a peace of mind that something's not going to break and the seller's going to say, well, I'm not fixing it. We're just going to closing. They have the incentive to get it fixed because it's not costing them anything. And the buyer has that peace of mind that everything's going to be in working order at that time. Now we get to the home inspection clause where you're either removing the home inspection clause, some of these buyers, or they're capping it. I would strongly recommend, if you have a buyer who wants to remove the home inspection clause, try to let them know that they should put a cap on it and still get the home inspection. And by putting a cap on, what we're basically saying is that in the home inspection, if there are $8,000 or $10,000 worth of things that need to be done, the buyer is fined up to $10,000. You want to word that a little bit different too. You also want to let them know that it's capped at $10,000, but the buyer has the option to purchase the property regardless of the amount of repairs. That'll open it up for a little bit of negotiation if need be, because you do have the seller in a situation now, if they've agreed to that, where it's going to open up for negotiations. Maybe there's $15,000 worth of work that needs to be done. And the buyer's saying, well, I can pay 12.5, see if the seller can do 25. That might help out the situation too. And those of you on the listing side, when something like that happens, or even on the buyer side, try to politely and nicely remind the selling agent that this would need to be disclosed to the next buyer. So why not deal with the devil that you know right now, where we're only asking for 2,500? This may hinder their deal for the next buyer. They have to disclose that. The agent has to disclose that if it's a major defection or anything defective. So make sure that you let them know that, but you can put that in there, but strongly try to talk them into doing a cap on there, not completely removing the home inspection, and be very specific what the cap will cover: structural, roof, windows, air conditioning, heating, electrical, plumbing. Be very specific, because you don't want to leave it open-ended, because the selling agent doesn't want it open-ended, because now they don't want somebody saying that there's a nail pop or the doorknob's loose. Be so specific that it makes it easy for the selling agent to explain to the seller, the listing agent, to explain to the seller. Be extremely specific with what it would be, whether it would be, major structural issue, roof, windows, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, those things, but make sure you spell it out for them, okay? Now, there's another step further than removing the home inspection clause. The next step is basically stating that the buyer will be responsible for and repair or do whatever for any and all inspections or repairs that are required by state, local, federal, mortgage company, home inspection, and mortgage company with the appraisal. Will do. Okay. So that's another step up from just saying we're not going to ask for anything to do with the home inspection. I have seen, and this is happening now, guys, I've seen it 3 times so far in the last month, conventional mortgage appraisers calling for repairs. We all know that FHA is the toughest in VA, but we're starting to see conventional appraisers call for a repair or a certification. In this case, it was siding was missing. They called for it to be replaced. The other case, it was roof. They could visually see that the roof was bad and there's shingles missing. They called for a certification of that. And this is conventional, guys. This can happen very rarely. But what the appraisers are doing in this day and age is that they're trying to cover themselves. So if they're seeing stuff that's major and blatantly, they're calling for it, even on the conventional loan basis. So what happens is they're calling for that repair or that replacement or whatever or certification of that. That's not the buyer. That's the house. So when the house fails, it's the seller side. So in a normal market, the seller would have to take care of that. But in this market, the buyers are taking care of that. So if you want to have the buyer, or if they want to take a step further from the home inspection, talk about the fact that the CO, mortgage inspections, home inspection, local, state, federal, roll it all in there. Any and all of those, the buyer will make the repairs or accept it. If it can be accepted with any deficiency, we'll accept it. And that will help you. That will beat out the person who is waiving the home inspection or doing the home inspection for information purposes only. Again, we're going to roll on to the next one, which is kind of, you've seen this and you heard it happen. Buyer to pay for any appraisal shortage with a cap and proof of funds, guys. It doesn't mean a hill of beans unless you have proof of funds, and you got to have a cap on that. So make sure you put the cap on it. And again, I put it in here for any cap with proof of funds. Another thing that's happening is buyers are offering rent backs, and occupancy agreements to sellers. Very, very, very tricky situation when you get into that. But a lot of sellers don't know where they're going. That's one of the reasons they're not putting their houses on the market right now. They're afraid to get out in this market and have to put a bid in with somebody, 50 other people want to like it. So some of them are saying contingent upon them finding suitable housing. Some of them are just uneasy and they're not putting it in there and they're hoping that they can find a home. But the buyer being proactive, stating that we will go to closing and we will rent back or I'm sorry, I'm a little lost here. We'll rent back or have an occupancy agreement for the buyer. Let me tell you something that's extremely important when you get into this situation. At all costs, from the buyer's point of view and the seller's point of view, both point of view, avoid a rent back. The word rent, renter, landlord, tenant, that's what that is. That basically gives the tenant, whoever's going to be the tenant, all of the New Jersey laws that are provided to protect a tenant. So now you might get into a situation where you have somebody who stops paying and you got to take forever to get them out of the house. They have all the same rights that any other tenant would have, even though it's only short term. To stay away from the rent back, you want to go with an occupancy agreement. The occupancy agreement is entirely different than a rent back. And yes, it can be crazy, stating that, you know, the seller's rent, the seller will owe $300 a day if they're not do not exit home by such and such a date. That's what you should be doing. Go for an occupancy agreement, not a rent back. Okay. And with the occupancy agreement, you won't find that in zip forms or anywhere like that. That is definitely something that you want an attorney to draw up. So make sure that whatever attorney that you use, or if you don't have an attorney yet, you're newer, make sure you talk to some people at the office or your manager, find out what attorney that they use, and have them draw up an occupancy agreement. Now, that occupancy agreement, you have it now, you know what it looks like, so you have it and you'll have an understanding for the next time that you do that. But by all means, stay away from a rent back. It is dangerous and it's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Make sure you do the occupancy agreement. Also, buyers are giving the sellers the choice of settlement date, which is a great thing, especially if you have a buyer who is very flexible, where they can give the seller a flexible settlement date. They let the seller choose. You can put that in there, but again, with the offer, you must put a date in there with an asterisk stating that or seller's choice. Okay. But you have to put a date in there for it to be a legal offer. Okay, remember that there must be a date in there. So the buyer wants to settle in 45 days, and it's the 30th of August. You put, the 30th of August as the settlement date with an asterisk, stating that, but the seller may choose their settlement date. So if you do something like that, you're giving them a little bit more time to find a home. It might match up. They may have planned. They may have 5 offers that want to settle in 45 days, but they're not settling for theirs until 65 days or 75 days. So what's happening is now they got to take temporary housing here or there, or God forbid, stay with their parents or whatever, or be in a hotel room. So it might make a huge difference to the seller that you're giving them that flexible date. It's something that maybe money can't buy. So you might be able to beat out something that is a little higher, giving them the peace of mind that they can pick their settlement date to line it up with what they're settling on. And then that runs us into the reverse contingency, which we kind of sort of talked about. But the reverse contingency would be, normally a seller will write in the MLS contingent upon them finding suitable housing. Then when they go to contract, it would be in the contract, it's contingent upon them finding suitable housing on or before, normally 45 days to find the property. What you can do as a buyer is you can actually put that in the offer, stating that the sale is contingent upon the seller finding suitable housing within 60 days of contract signing, something like that. Again, you're giving the seller a peace of mind. Keep in mind, they may not know where they're going. They're afraid they're going out into this market. And it may mean it may be worth its weight in gold to them. But what you're going to do is that reverse contingency. You're going to insert that contingency in the offer, stating that it is contingent upon the seller finding suitable housing. And also offer to pay for the seller's commission. They're doing that. This will also help with short appraisals. After the fact, if you're worried about the appraisal and the buyers decided they want to pay for some of the seller's commission, 3% or 4% or whatever it might be, they can reduce the property by 3 or 4%. The bottom line is the same for them, but they're getting that 3 or 4%. Their commissions being paid or a percentage of it, so that will help out with the appraisal. But remember, to negotiate that after the fact, you should talk to the other agent. Say, listen, instead of having an appraisal problem, how about we reduce it by the 4% and they'll pay for 4% of the buyer's or seller's closing costs. So some stranger things that we've seen come around. Offer to pay for an exotic car rental for a weekend. If you go to a place, you're showing a home, it's got a 2-car garage and maybe a classic car in there or something, and it looks like it might be a motorhead. That might be something to consider if you're a buyer. That might help you. I've seen there where we've had an offer like this where the buyer literally offered to donate $500. Was it $1,000? I think it was $1,000 to the seller's choice of charity. It was a higher price listing in a higher price, but the seller was like, well, that's a really good gesture, and they kind of went with it, and they could have gotten a little bit more from someone else, but they liked the fact that the buyer said, we'll donate something to your choice of charity. Last but not least, we've had somebody actually put an offer in. This one didn't go close, but they put an offer in. They were going to pay $1,000 towards the child. They knew they had a child, the seller, towards their college fund. We've had them where they put offers to deposit $2,000 towards their 401k for anything. These are just some of the strange things that are happening in the market today, which buyers are going through with offers. So that's why we wanted to cover them and kind of give you a little bit of a list that you can use. Try to give you a little list that you can use, but I would build your own list. And again, I would name it things I've seen buyers put in offers. So what we're going to do is we're going to move on because we're running a little short on time. I thought I would have a little better situation on here. I apologize for that. But what we've seen some agents do and put in offers. I have an agent in here. Every offer he puts in, he offers to pay, to order, pay, and meet the CO at the listing. That takes that off the plate of that listing agent. They're going to lean a little bit more towards that, okay? Having the mortgage representative contact the listing agent, okay? The buyer's agent offering to meet the appraiser. We're seeing that now where the listing agents are telling them they have to meet them, but in the beginning when all this started happening, I had buyer's agents here that would meet the appraiser. And buyer's agents who are literally willing to pay for any repairs with the cap that happens in it. So again, that affects the bottom line of the seller and the buyer. Those are some things that I've seen agents do. But I want to talk about something. We're going to move on here, making it easy for the listing agent. Again, guys, talking about our reputation. Your reputation is everything. I'm going to tie these last two pieces together because I believe they do go together. One is make it easy for the listing agent, and one's your reputation is your career. So make sure you're putting your offer. If you go to Zip Forms and you're doing an offer, do the offer, transfer it into a PDF. Have it in a PDF. Within the PDF, do a cover sheet with the bullet points right up front, the price, the financing, if they're waiving appraisal or they're doing anything, put it all up there in bullet points. We want to make it as easy as possible for this listing agent to view your offer so it stands out in their mind as you making it easy for them. And they're going to present it that way. And it might be just the way they present it to the seller, talking about how organized you are, that it could make a difference. I hear you, Danielle. I agree with you there. Yeah. Danielle says, if they're not paying 3%, I'm not paying for anything. Got you there. Yeah. Put in the why for the buyer in your bullet points, not a love letter. We don't want to put a love letter in there, just the why. The why might be, hey, I grew up in the buyer loves a home because they grew up in the area. They grew up in the neighborhood. Buyer likes the area, relocating. Buyer's brother lives in the area. That, something short and sweet, the why. You want to give them the why. You give them all the terms, bullet points, nice and easy. Throw in the why for them, okay? Include the pre-approval or the pre-qualification in a PDF form, okay? Make sure that you have that available. If you're taking a buyer out today and showing them a home and they have not talked to a mortgage rep, you do not have a buyer, because no one is going to consider their offer without the very least a pre-qual. And it's a sticky situation. I would just tell the buyer, I'm sorry, I don't work like that. You do need to be pre-approved or pre-qualified first before we're even going to go look at homes, because it's going to be something, it's going to be a very competitive situation. And without it, they're not even going to consider your offer. And also include the proof of funds, that paper in there. Do it all in a PDF from the zip forms, however you want to do it. And do yourself a favor, text it and email it and call the agent to let them know you text them and you email it. Now they're going to get that text on their phone. It's going to be so easy to read in a PDF. They're going to love you for it. They can print it out. They can do what they need to do. You're also emailing it, but make it easy. Make that cover sheet in that PDF, hit all the major bullet points of what's going on with the offer, and then you'll include everything else after that. But they have the gist of it. In the bullet points, I would put see proof of funds attached, see pre-approval attached. Yes, yeah, we'll email a presentation. Absolutely, Marianne. So that's what you want to put it in there, because you got to make it easy for these listing agents. They are going through 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 offers. They will remember that offer and the agent that made their life a little easier. Instead of going through opening up an email and there's 10 attachments, nothing annoys them more than to have to open up this attachment to look at the offer, this attachment to look at the pre-approval, this attachment to do that. That really, really bugs them. And think of it, if you had to go through 30 or 40 offers, wouldn't that bug you too? So make it as easy as you can for the listing agent, okay? And one thing, we're going to roll into reputation in your career. I know this sounds really strange, but this will come back to you. Every home you show, even if you're not putting the offer in, text the agent, thank them. Say, hey, just showed your 123 Main Street. Thanks for letting us see it. This is Bill Alexander. What that's going to do is, if that buyer does decide to put an offer in, you have a line of communication opened up. When you email or you text him the offer, he's going to see that he already talked to you. Now, in their mind, they're connected with you now. Okay. They're saying, wow, this person thanked me. That's cool. Okay. And now they just sent me everything in a PDF and it's easy for me to read. So, yeah, please do showing time feedback. Absolutely, Danielle. Yeah, make sure you're doing the feedback for them also. So just calling them and saying, hey, thanks for letting me show it. Not saying I have an offer coming or anything like that. I believe that unqualified approved buyers should only be attending. Yep. So make sure that you're reaching out to them. I know it's a little extra work, and I know that it's not like you're getting to show 10 homes these days. You're only able to show 2 or 3, and there's not much on the market. But text the listing agent. Just say, hey, just going through 123 Main Street. Thanks for letting us see it. Thanks for letting us see it. Next thing would be never, ever, ever, ever say my buyer. Worst thing you can say to a listing agent is my buyer, my buyer. First of all, it's not your buyer, it's the buyer. Okay. Once you say my buyer, you're in an adversarial situation now, because it's my buyer and it's your seller, and we're going to go at it. That's what it feels like. So say the buyer. Same when you have the seller. Say the seller, not my seller. All it does is it makes the other agent feel that, number one, is my information really getting to the seller or the buyer when you talk like that, or is some of my stuff getting diluted and not getting to them? And number two, it definitely makes the situation adversarial right from the get-go once you start talking about ownership of my buyer, my seller, okay? Offer the agent to do the agreement of sales. You can do it now. You can get all the information and you can do it. Put it right in your bullet points right now. Buyer's agent to do agreement of sales if seller's agent wants to. And every showing you do, we talked about texting the agent, thank you. After closing too, guys, after closing, you were probably one of 15, 20, 18 offers, 3 offers, whatever the case may be, and they chose your buyer. Now, it may be because the buyer made some ridiculous offer, whatever the case may be, but send a thank you, thanking that agent. Say, I really appreciate working with you. Thank you so much for having your seller accept that, for having the seller accept that offer. Look forward to doing business with you in the future. Again, that's a text. You have a line of communication with that person. Next time around, there might only be 2 offers and yours is one of them. And they remember how they worked with you. They remember how easy it was. They remember that you were thankful that you were able to get the buyer that home. And they may lean or push their seller towards you, or vice versa. We get into a normal market, where there's, 10 houses for every buyer. So they got their choice now. And they might just want to show yours more often than anything else. And they might push for that over something else that might be very similar, price the same condition, everything's the same. They are going to be more prone to try and show your listing if you do that. And that'll save your reputation, and it'll build on your reputation. And you have no idea when that will come back to you, but I guarantee you someday it will come back to you. I have an agent in here I was just discussing the other day with, and we were talking about there were 17 offers, and the listing agent literally called him up and said, I got your offer approved. I told the seller I worked with you before. I know how you work. When you say you're going to do something, you do it. And I've never had a problem with you. So I told them that they should accept yours. There were offers that were higher than yours. But the seller agreed they didn't want any monkey business. And I told them there'd be no monkey business with this guy. It'll be straight and forward and straight cut, and the deal will close. And his reputation got that buyer that home. So that's how important it is. And then my last thing is, do what you say when you say it. If you're dealing with the listing agent and you say you're going to get them this or you're going to get them that, do it when you say it. Again, it's all about your reputation. I'm not saying do these things just in this market. I'm saying this should be done in any market. We've become an industry that is not nice to one another a lot of the times. And this market it festers that. So do your best to change that around and make sure your reputation is the gold reputation, and you're the one that the other agents want to work with, and that'll do your career just fine.